Hello and welcome to our next video. This time what we're going to look at is actually building a checkpoint firewall, whether you're looking for a gateway or a management server or MDS device. We're going to build this on VMware on our local desktop. Now I've actually just installed the VMware Workstation locally, so I'll take you through this from scratch. So if we run this, I could lie slightly. Looks like I've got an old VMware here, so let's just clear this while I'm just doing a quick voiceover. So this is generally very useful if you're running a lab. So VMware, you can use tools such as Workstation. VMware Player may also be an option. If you're not looking in a corporate environment, if you don't have options of using vSphere, for example. So if I just do a quick new virtual machine, so top left, we're going to use the typical settings here. There's nothing too fancy with the default checkpoint install. You'll need to download the checkpoint ISO from checkpoint.com, and you're going to need your login details for that. Now there's a few options here in terms of versions. If you want to go to R77 or one of those flavors and go through your upgrade process, that's all perfectly possible. For this, I'm just going to use R8010. So this is the ISO I have previously downloaded. I'm going to link to this. Don't worry about the error it says here about the operating system. That is not a problem for this. We're going to use Linux. Now for this, we're going to use Red Hat version 5. Now VMware doesn't care too much about this. It's more of the kind of default settings for CPU and RAM. We're going to change that later anyway. So if I give this a name, let's just call this our R8010 lab. What I like to do sometimes in my labs is also put the IP address that I'm going to be using. It makes it a bit easier later on, or if I come back in a week's time and I've forgotten how to log on. So let's go for 10.10, that looks good. Minimum disk space size. I'm going to run this as a gateway. I'm going to build it and then trash it. So I don't need any space at all. 20 gig should be plenty. But I'm going to put 30 on there anyway. It gives us a bit more space to play around with the partitions once we go through the install. That will make more sense later on. Store the virtual disk as a single file as well. Now if we quickly go into customize hardware, a couple of quick final changes. I like to increase the RAM to a suitable size. 2 gig or roughly 2 gig is generally quite useful, and also add a couple of processors there as well, depending on how powerful your box is. Actually in this case we can probably add quite a few processors here. Well, let me do 2 and 2. Let's go for 2 and 2. Network adapter. This will be important for later on because you'll need to connect to this box to complete the install. So for this section, we're just going to go through what is essentially the BIOS build, as if you was in your comms room and you're connected via a VGI or console cable. So close and finish. So that's the first stage done. It's that simple. We've downloaded the ISO, we've uploaded it into VMware Workstation, and we're now ready to power on this device for the first time. So what we're about to go through here is exactly the same as if you've got a CD in an open server, if you've got a Checkpoint appliance and it's booted up for the first time and you're on console, or if you're using Checkpoint's isomorphic USB installer and you've put it into manual mode. And of course, so then you are connected via some sort of VGA screen as well. So this would be the same output that you'll see in all of these scenarios. So if we power on this machine now, and boom, in we go. So, yes, we want to install Gaia on this system. This has been the same now for quite a few versions. Checkpoint slightly changed the display format, but otherwise it's generally the same. Now this should run through quite quickly. Shouldn't take too long at all, but I will actually slightly expand this if it'll let me. There we go. So it is possible when using VMware Workstation, you can run a couple of gateways if you want to set up a clustered environment. You can quite easily run 2 gateways and a management server, for example, and put it in its own VMware network. So you can practice things like your clustering, or if you want to NAT out to the internet, you can run your own policy. There's quite a lot you can do just locally on a desktop lab, which is quite useful if you need to be practicing, if you have an exam coming up, or something similar. So let me just pause this recording now. It looks like it might take a little bit longer than what I thought, and then we'll come back to this once we're required to do the first prompt. Okay, so it's taken about 2 minutes to get this far, so that wasn't too bad. So the first prompt we've been asked for is, do you want to proceed with the installation? Machine info, great, fantastic. It tells me what we're installing on. Generally, you're going to know. In this scenario, you're going to be right next to the machine. I mean, you know, come on. So let's go for OK. On to the next step. Keyboard type, US would generally be your general preference. Anybody from UK watching this, I'm afraid to say there is no UK layout. I've checked. So, OK. Now, the partition size. Now, this is an area where you have your first decision to make. Now, your options here and how you'd select these would depending on the device that you're installing later on. For example, a gateway, you're generally going to have it'll be a smaller hard drive anyway, but your gateway, you probably wouldn't be too worried about log space because that would be offloaded elsewhere. You want as much room as possible for backups and upgrades and your system root. A management server, however, you may want bigger log space. If this is going to be an MDS server, majority of your space will be in the logs. So there's options here, and that's a bit more detailed than what we're going to go into. For the gateway, I'm going to put 10 gig into the system root. It's going to eat up about 5 or 6 gig almost straight away as part of the install, and then that will give me enough space there once I hit tab. That will auto calculate the other areas. That gives me enough space in backup and upgrade to at least do one backup. Now, as for log space, I'm not overly concerned, so I'm going to set that to 5. Give myself some more space for backups. Once you've done, OK. Password. I don't believe there's actually a minimum requirement here, really. And you can always change this later. It's quite simple. So IP address. So I've already set the IP address, if you remember from earlier. So I knew what I was going to call it. And if you just tab down, it will auto set a default gateway for you. In the VMware environment, I always set my VMware interface as .254. If I'm building quite a few of these, it's nice and easy to just tab through. It's quite useful. So OK there. And then you just need to select Write and OK again. It just says, you're going to format all of your hard drives. Do you want to continue? Yes. Don't panic. This is on your laptop. It's fine. It's just in this scenario, the 30 gig that we partitioned earlier. So that single file, that space that you've allocated, that's what's being formatted. In a real world environment, then yes, this will be formatting any hardware or hard drive space that you have in your HP server, for example. So I've hit OK there. This will now go through the steps. Again, I'm going to pause the recording. This would typically take 5 or 10 minutes for this 30 gig drive. Depending on what you have, it could be up to sort of half an hour. Okay, so now that has completed, we get the message coming up saying installation is complete for first time configuration. So we're about to hit reboot. When the device comes back up, we need to web browse, so HTTPS, and then the IP address that we've just set. And that will take you through the web GUI part of the installation. That's when you select your software components, set up things like NTP and DNS if you wish, and you can continue from there. Thanks for watching this video.